And yeah, I wanted to, as Jenna said, I had the good fortune of helping to start the land trust back. We started working on it back in 1998, and officially it was incorporated in 2000. And it's really amazing to see how sometimes you just kind of get little things going and then more people join, and funders, volunteers. It was all volunteer for the first 3 or 4 years, and then it's got momentum, and then things like this happen. You know, an amazing preserve like Sierra Valley Preserve, this nature center. It's really amazing to see. You know, it's beyond our wildest dreams when we first were starting the land trust, and I'm so glad that you all are involved now, and have been involved, many of you. So yeah, calling this one, and Jenna wanted me to approach it this way. Sierra Valley 101, we're going to keep it pretty high level about some of the, placing Sierra Valley, like where it is, why it's significant, some of the superlatives about Sierra Valley, like its biodiversity, its importance from a water perspective, it's important from a cultural perspective, some of the stats about like its size, how like you were asking earlier about its size and how it compares to other places, things like that. Towards the end of the presentation, we will get into the weeds some on like specific bird species and wildlife species and some of their natural history and habitat use and things like that. But we're going to start at a pretty high level, partly to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page. You know, we're looking as docents as a program here to have a common base of knowledge that everybody can build from. And Jenna did a really good job in her presentation. It's like all the logistics of what we do, that's important, but also like how you do it and the messaging, the interactions with the public. And so, yeah, so a lot of what I'll cover is kind of around the high-level stats of what makes Sierra Valley unique. And I wanted to start with a land acknowledgement. And we're on the ancestral unceded homelands of the Washoe and the Mountain Maidu people. And probably Paiute too, you know, the Paiute Indian Reservation at Pyramid Lake, and even further west from that, like in the came kind of close to like Doyle and stuff, north of the Fort Sage Mountains. So probably the Paiute probably use Sierra Valley as well. But they've inhabited these lands since time immemorial. A lot of accounts from elders and archaeological evidence increasingly suggests maybe as long as 10,000 years or more that there's been human habitation of this valley and this area. We honor their deep and ongoing relationship to this place and are committed to listening, learning, and working together for the benefit of this land and the life it sustains. And I do want to acknowledge the Feather River Land Trust too for taking a lot of leadership in involving Washoe and Maidu elders in the development of exhibits for the Nature Center. I really appreciate how they have told the story from the perspective of Native Americans, which has often been lacking when it comes to interpretive exhibits. It's often told more from like archaeologist perspective or science perspective, and I think the Land Trust has done a really good job of coming from a Maidu and Washoe perspective in them telling the story about how they use these lands. So keep up that good work, and we all have a chance to contribute to that. A little introduction to me and Sierra Valley. These are pictures of me and my brother and my mom. I was born in Portola in the old Western Pacific Railroad Railroad Hospital, and not the Railroad Museum. The museum is near there. So I'm kind of a Middle Fork Feather River kid, and lucky to have parents that would take us out to Sierra Valley and other places. And one of two of the formative things for me was that we knew Emilio Folke and a lot of the ranch families out here, and we'd get permission to do things like go hunting, and we'd hunt. This is on the preserve. This is on the Sierra Valley Preserve, me with my little camo hunting hat here. And it's just right near the Bolson house is where we'd often hunt. There's a couple rock dams that go across the river channels there, and we would waterfowl hunt there. And then on the left, another thing we would do as a family was we would get worms for fishing season, for the opening day of fishing season. A lot of under the cow pies is always the best place to find good night crawlers. So we would go out there, and you know, when you're growing up with those kind of experiences, we were lucky to have parents that took us out for things like that. And I'm the guy with the binoculars there, and my brother with I don't know what he's got, a stick I think it's a stick rather than a horn or something, an antler, but it just becomes part of who you are, you know, the kind of the magic of Sierra Valley. We were often out there gathering the worms in April when a lot of the waterfowl were arriving and some of the breeding birds like yellow-headed blackbirds and stuff, and it was just a magical experience. I think at that age you don't always realize how magical it is till in hindsight when you get older and stuff, but it was a real formative part of my upbringing, and also a big reason I went into wildlife biology. As Jenna mentioned, I'm a wildlife biologist and conservation biologist, and helped start the Land Trust, partly out of a love of this place. When I was going away to college, I went to UC Davis and have a couple degrees in wildlife biology from Davis and University of Arizona. But there was a lot of, especially in eastern Plumas County when I was in college, it was a time where when I was a young kid, there was like one golf course in the Gray Eagle area, and then there was quite a bit of development, you know, at that time, places I used to like fish and hunt and ride horseback and stuff. So that's part of why we started the Land Trust, was try to keep some of the most special areas open, you know, places that we loved as kids and that the community loved. And so those early years kind of really got me going in that direction of wildlife and nature conservation, agricultural conservation. A couple more pictures of me with my kid. I have two kids that are now 18 and 22, and this is them when they were younger. This is actually in Montana, and my son's holding the binoculars backwards there in the picture. But he eventually learned to hold them correctly, and this is my dad. We're out doing a Christmas bird count in Sierra Valley. And my dad was really, he got me outside a lot, you know, hunting and fishing, and was a big influence in my life. He actually taught a class at Portola High School called Outdoors, which the Portola High School kids, and he'll remember, and stuff that you would never do now. We like learned to shoot guns, and we would shoot skeet and target shoot, and learn to fly fish, learn to build winter survival skills, cross-country skiing, fly fishing. We'd go on salmon fishing field trips, and one thing that was impressed upon me, like through the outdoors class and stuff, maybe just stick on that one, is part of my parents' ethic. My mom was a teacher too at Portola Elementary School, was that it was important to try to get everyone out on the land, to provide, like in the outdoors class, like everyone would go on the field trips and stuff. It was for every kid going to, you know, to the public schools. And I think that's at the essence of like why we established the Sierra Valley Preserve in essence, is that so anyone, regardless of where they're from, their economic status, their ethnicity, could come out and enjoy the same wonder, experience the wonder of Sierra Valley like we were lucky to do. You know, we've been lucky to do in our lifetimes or when we were kids. And this is a great example. The Nature Center is a great example of furthering that goal of celebrating and sharing the magic of Sierra Valley. So Jenna has shared some of this, but the purpose of the Nature Center is to share and celebrate Sierra Valley's beauty, biodiversity, and cultural significance. And as I was kind of getting at, a shorter version of that is that everyone, regardless of who they are, would have that same chance to experience the magic and celebrate the magic of Sierra Valley. And this is my dad and my daughter when she was a lot younger in the Sierra Valley wetlands. So I'm calling this little section Placing Sierra Valley. Oh, and by the way, I think we're going to hold, even though I love addressing questions, I think we're going to save the questions till the end, partly for the purposes of filming and partly just for continuity of the presentation. And hopefully you're tracking my time. Jen, I should watch my time. Sometimes I'm long-winded. I don't want you guys to be here till like 5 o'clock or something. So, but yes, a lot of, there are, when it comes to, it's so cool that so many of you have been docents, first of all. I think that is so cool that we have veteran docents here, so there's a lot of experience to share. But I think it's important in a place like Sierra Valley. Sierra Valley is interesting in that so many people know the Sierra by coming up Interstate 80 or Highway 50. So, Tahoe, Truckee, Lake Tahoe area and stuff. And I mean, those of you who are here are familiar with Sierra Valley, obviously, and you love Sierra Valley, you've gotten to know it. But a lot of the visitors won't be familiar at all. Everyone who comes up, the vast majority of people who come up Interstate 80, they go south or they go all the way through to Reno. And they don't realize that if you turn and go north 25 miles, you come to this Lake Tahoe-sized valley. And so a lot of times when people see it for the first time, they're just like, oh my God, I didn't know this existed in California, They have this conception of the Sierra that is more like a Lake Tahoe South, including Yosemite and the national parks and stuff. So, placing a place, so being able to talk about where a place is and its characteristics of size and eco-regional orientation and stuff is always important. But I think for Sierra Valley, it's particularly important because there's going to be a lot of people who are totally unfamiliar and gobsmacked by this can't be California. What are we doing here? As I mentioned earlier in the acknowledgement, starting out in the placing, these are the Maidu and Washoe homelands, and the Maidu word for Sierra Valley is Kehem Heli Koyo. Kehem Heli Koyo. With the Maidu, their language almost became extinct recently, to the point where there were only about a dozen speakers of the language. There's been quite a bit of emphasis in the last 10 or 15 years on, they developed a Maidu dictionary. There's been Maidu language classes. So there is a part of avoiding cultural extinction for the Maidu and rebuilding culture in place has been language education. And I'm really delighted the Feather River Land Trust has placed an emphasis on Maidu language in their exhibits and is going to even further that further, including with wildlife names and plant names. But yeah, I think it's important. I'm hoping, and I think Jenna has mentioned this, that there might even be Maidu language classes offered here, at the Nature Center. Because my dad was a high school Spanish teacher for 40 years, and he always would emphasize pronunciation. But both Washoe and Maidu pronunciation is very subtle. I'm not going to go into it, but the accents you see, there is an emphasis on that syllable where the accent is, as there would be in Spanish or something. But a lot of times the vowels and consonants are not pronounced as you might think, So, but I think so. So Kehem Heli Koyo is the word for Sierra Valley. Koyo is a word for valley generally, and this is their world map, their homeland map, surrounded by a water world. And this is it covers a really. This is one from the exhibit. It's a reed. We didn't have a laser pointer, so I have a reed, a metal reed in my hand. But interestingly, Sierra Valley is right at the center of the Maidu world map. And the Feather River watershed in general is right at the center of it. And so this is Maidu homeland, and I think that's obviously an important. The Feather River Land Trust has emphasized it, and I think as docents, as volunteers, we want to emphasize that. And I'll talk more later in the presentation about more about Maidu cultural uses of the land in Sierra Valley. And then the Washoe, I've been hearing it pronounced Washoe, have you, rather than Washoe? Yeah, the Washoe people I've interacted with tend to say it that way. And their word for Sierra Valley, Man, I'm not sure how to pronounce I've heard it like mochim dete, kind of like that, mochim dete, sort of like mochim dete. And it means the grass seed people lived here. There's accounts from people like Jim Beckworth of coming across Sierra Valley in the past, and there just being seas of grass. And some of the these numbers on this Washoe map indicate places of settlement in and around Sierra Valley. And there's some really, I read this PhD dissertation by a University of Nevada, Reno. I didn't read the whole thing, but it was about Washoe language and place-based language. That's one thing that is so critical to both Maidu and Washoe, is that they have place-based languages. So for those of you who are geographically oriented, it's extremely fascinating. Like the words for things will be like the hill where the raven dwelled, or the hill where we sought the acorns, or the hill where the chief died, or, it's like really specific stuff. And it's really fascinating in that way. It's like totally place-based language. So in some ways, the Washoe stayed more intact. They're a federally recognized tribe that wasn't as decimated by boarding schools and disease and other factors. So they stayed a little more intact as a tribe. So their language stayed a little more intact. There's like lots of speakers. But even one of the points of that dissertation about the Washoe is that they haven't been inhabiting Sierra Valley in a long time. Even though they had villages in Sierra Valley, even though for thousands of years it was part of their homeland, their language and words were relatively quickly forgotten that involved the places of Sierra Valley. But they're in an effort now to regain their knowledge of this. There's some of the elders know, but that was one of the findings of this dissertation, is that the place-based language, if you're not in the places, the language quickly goes away because it's verbally passed on, traditionally at least. So that's a couple things. Here's the Washoe homeland. Here is kind of centered on Lake Tahoe, and here's Sierra Valley shows up. So you can see that a lot of their homeland extended way up to Honey Lake, more kind of Paiute country out here to the northeast. And the red, the inner red is like their primary boundary. It's kind of where they would consider to have like year-round habitation and frequent use. But then currently, like where these dots are, see, I don't know if you can see these little circles. Those are the modern day Washoe communities. Mainly are sort of in the Carson Valley. They have a lot of population, and where their like tribal offices are for the most part. But they're interested in sort of re-inhabiting their former entire homeland. So that's part of such a key part of the placing of Sierra Valley, is knowledge of the Washoe and Maidu homelands. I love this nature center because you can actually look out the windows, and it feels like you have this nature center that, instead of being, I don't know what it is, 3,000 square feet or something, the main building. Suddenly it's like 100,000 acres, you're looking out the valley, and it's like really amazing. And I have this reed in my hand, so I'm going to use this to the best effect. But anyhow, so one of the things that I think, whether we're talking about multiple tribal traditions using Sierra Valley or biodiversity, part of the reason Sierra Valley is so diverse is that the triple confluence of three of the West's major landscapes, major ecoregions. And it really, each of those ecoregions, as you see here on the map, the Great Basin to the east, the Cascade influence coming from the north with, like, there's peaks just near us here at the Nature Center, like Sugarloaf, Reconnaissance Peak, Dota Saddle, that are very volcanic. They're very dominated by lava, volcanic stuff. And then more, to our south and kind of to the southwest is the more granite-dominated Sierra Nevada. And they all converge at Sierra Valley. So each of those ecoregions brings its own geology, soils, flora, fauna in a mosaic. It's not like they just meet at hard edges. There's kind of like it's more like a blender. It's more like you put pieces of each of these ecoregions in a blender in Sierra Valley. Because like underneath Sierra Valley, the base of Sierra Valley, it's a geologic, what's called a graben, where it had like a granite base that dropped like Lake Tahoe is the same thing, dropped like 1,600 feet deep, and then it filled with water. But then there's like lava all around it. It's all blended together. But anyway, that's the triple confluence of those three ecoregions is a major driver of biodiversity in Sierra Valley. And we'll talk more about that. Here's another shot. Nils' brother, I don't know, Nils isn't in here anymore, but Zeke Lunder made this map, but just a little bit different perspective that looks a little bit more north at the Great Basin and the Cascades coming from the north. And in this case, Sierra Valley's down here. So this map actually shows the Feather River watershed. You can see this kind of pinkish purple outline. And I feel so silly with this reed in my hand, but I like it at the same time. Yeah. But the Feather River watershed is the largest watershed in the Sierra Nevada. It's about a 2.4 million acre watershed, which is bigger than Yellowstone National Park. Yellowstone National Park is 2.25 million acres. So give you a feel for how big the Feather River watershed is. And Sierra Valley's down here in the southeast corner of the watershed. And I'll talk more about it, but Sierra Valley forms the headwaters of the middle fork of the Feather River, which along with the North Fork are the two biggest forks of the Feather. And and that's just, this is an interesting topo map. And the middle fork basically mostly flows south to north. And then the preserve is right here, right at the outlet. That's one really interesting thing about this nature center, right at the outlet of the big Sierra Valley Basin. And then the middle fork kind of takes a westward left-hand turn and exits this way and then flows all the way down to Lake Oroville with all the other forks, where all the other forks of the Feather meet. So as I was just saying, that Sierra Valley is at the headwaters of both the Feather River watershed and the Middle Fork Feather. And this is an interesting map that the Feather River Land Trust made. I think this one really shows it at a big scale, where you can see, Sacramento, Reno, Bay Area, and you can see how the Feather River flows. At Oroville, it starts flowing really south till it hits the Sacramento River, and then it flows, via the Sacramento to the Delta. But in the vicinity of the Delta, a lot of it is pumped into the California Aqueduct and heads down to Southern California, So the Feather River watershed is the headwaters also of the State Water Project and a source of water to more than 27 million Californians. So it's very significant in that sense. And partly why they decided to tap the Feather River watershed is because it is the biggest watershed in the Sierra Nevada. The main reason being is it's the only major watershed that flows west in the Sierra, where about half of it is east of the Sierra Crest. It flows through the Sierra Crest. The rate of erosion exceeded the rate of uplift of the Sierra volcanic batholith. And also because it has a lot of volcanics in it and stuff, but it was able to erode through, like the crest is kind of like right, kind of through here. And all this, what we're in here is east of the Sierra Crest, but it flows west, which is why it's such a, main reason it's such a big watershed. So it gathers a lot of water. And what else about this? I think here's Sierra Valley right here. You can see Highway 70. One thing, sometimes I think we've taken it for granted in the 25 years that we've been working on the land trust now, but those of you familiar with Reno and Sparks, and what this map doesn't show is how much the Carson Valley has developed around Washoe Lake, down through Carson Valley, down to Minden, Gardnerville. It's basically turning into a, whoa, how do I do that? Oh. Oh, don't touch the screen. What did it? Oh, when I touched the screen, it went off. So it's like sensitive to the. That's kind of cool. I got to watch my read here. I'll bend it backwards so it doesn't like. But anyway, like the whole like front range of the Sierra around Reno, south to Minden, Gardnerville, is becoming like one. It's kind of growing all together. And look how big it is. Sierra Valley, as big as Tahoe, and all that urban development. It's just right over the hills right here. And it could come here. It would come here. So I appreciate the efforts of the Feather River Land Trust, over the years to keep this open space for all the reasons, for agriculture, for scenery, for wildlife. Because, when we were talking, this preserve here is 2,500 acres, but the Land Trust and other partners like California Rangeland Trust, Pacific Forest Trust have now conserved like nearly 50,000 acres of the 120,000 acres is permanently conserved in Sierra Valley. So I'm heartened by that. And I think that's kind of what I wanted to show on that map. And I encourage you to write down your questions. I know it's probably hard to save them all for the end, but another interesting thing about the placing of Sierra Valley is where it's located relative to the Pacific Flyway. On the left, you can see there's this green. The green is what's considered to be the Pacific Flyway, and this particular map focuses on waterfowl. But it holds pretty true for shorebirds and other migratory birds as well. But you can see like Sierra Valley is like, oh, I can't touch it. Right there, well, I can do the shadow. Well, maybe not. Right there is Sierra Valley. And it's kind of an interesting place. Along the eastern front range of the Sierra, you have a lot of, on the east side, you're in the Great Basin. So you have all these like terminal lakes, terminal river systems, like the Truckee River terminates in, that's kind of a weird depiction of Pyramid Lake, but that's Pyramid Lake. And Susan River terminates at Honey Lake. And the Carson River terminates at the Carson Sink and Mono Lake. And there's like Owens Lake down here. But anyway, this eastern side of the Sierra at the interface with the Great Basin, a lot of birds migrate right along the east side of the Sierra. They either like right along the ridge because they get uplift along the ridge. And there's lots of lots of wetland lakes, these terminal lakes and stuff, places for shorebirds and waterbirds to drop off, either to breed or to just keep migrating. So, you can kind of see that. I don't know if you can see it, but that's along here, kind of along the Nevada edge. But there's also this interesting kind of southwest to northeast little side channel of the Pacific Flyway, where there are a lot of the breeding birds kind of there. They like hang along the coast. Sandhill cranes would fit this, where a lot of the sandhill cranes like winter in the Central Valley in the Delta area, and then they migrate in a northeast direction from there. And Sierra Valley is one of the first places they hit as they're migrating northeast. And if the conditions are good, a lot of them just drop right down in Sierra Valley. And then also migrating back south, a lot of species. But there are multiple species that are wintering like in the coastal California or further south. They kind of go up the East Sierra. They either come right from the coast in that northeast direction, or they come up the East Sierra and then go that northeast direction. So it's kind of interesting. There's kind of a migratory conjunction within the Pacific Flyway. Eating birds to be in Sierra Valley and migratory birds that are just passing through, what we call passage migrants. It's interesting too. I think like in a place like being at the Nature Center here, sometimes we forget that the edge of the valley is 25 minutes from Reno and Sierraville is 25 minutes from Truckee, so it's really, which I think can be a blessing and a curse. It's nice. It provides like access to like lots of people. International Airport in Reno, all the Tahoe Truckee scene, the millions of Nevadans and Californians that travel on Interstate 80 are really close to our valley here. And that can be a threat, as I say, but it also can, I think a lot of people are going to visit this nature center once it's out there. This is like, it's kind of like one of California's best kept secrets. Sierra Valley is one of California's best kept secrets. And and it's not very far from those places. So Sierra Valley superlatives, wanted to hit on some of the, one thing I've done a lot of my career is lead tours in nature, tours in Sierra Valley and other places, but especially on properties that the land trust has been either working on conservation easements with ranch families or on purchases. And sometimes it's been like hiking out in the wetlands. Sometimes it's been via canoes. Sometimes we're doing like auto tours and stuff. And it's usually a combination of people who might have interest in being members or supporters or volunteers of the Feather River Land Trust. A lot of times it's like donors and foundation representatives, representatives of private foundations that are interested potentially in funding a transaction, funding the purchase of a conservation easement or a place. And then a lot of times it's also agency people, like representatives from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or California Department of Water Resources or Sierra Nevada Conservancy. And so these superlatives are, they're kind of our secret sauce for how we've, it's sort of like, because Sierra Valley isn't necessarily on people's radar screen, a lot of people aren't that familiar with it. So one thing Sierra Valley is blessed by is like data, whether it's a number of wildlife species, how big it is, how much water it supplies to the state of California. It sells itself. The beauty of it, the working ranches, it sells itself. But these superlatives are kind of like points we've been hitting on for a long time about, it sells itself. All you got to do is get someone out on a trail or in a canoe in Sierra Valley, and you don't have to tell them all this superlatives. They fall in love with, 99% of the people, they like, oh my God, there's no other place like this, but sometimes the agency types, the foundation types, you got to show, there's more species here than there and stuff. So anyhow, these superlatives. I've hit on this, how, Sierra Valley is one of, and there's Attilio Genasi would always say this, Mary's father-in-law. And that Sierra Valley truly is one of California in the West natural wonders. And it's one of the ones that people don't know about, but truly is one of the natural and scenic wonders of California and the Western United States. And in addition to the spectacular scenery and working ranches, it's very ecologically, culturally, and hydrologically important at a local level, state level, continental level, and global level. And we'll get into all of that, including the global, a little later. So some of the superlative size, some of these focus on size predominantly. It's the largest mountain valley in California, with mountain defined in kind of a scientific way as montane, 3,500 feet in elevation or higher in this case, 120,000 acres or 188 square miles, which very interestingly I think is almost exactly the same size as the surface of Lake Tahoe. And this is a shot we took in an airplane several years ago, but kind of give you that Tahoe feel. This is kind of, this is the preserve, the southern boundary of the preserve. We're over here. This is County Road A24, Plumas County Road A24. This is where the corrals are, where there's a lot of really cool new stuff happening with trails and the wildlife observation platform they're installing out there. But the boundary goes about half a mile from the corral south into the wetlands here, and then it goes due west across. But yeah, this map really shows the wetlands of Sierra Valley really well. I think this was taken in April, but the nature center's over here, and you can get a feel for that Tahoe-esque size of the valley with these aerial kind of shots. Or if you climb like Sugarloaf Peak or get any elevation, around the valley, that was something that always captivated me as a kid. We were often like either hunting or hiking in the hills on the north side of Sierra Valley, and just the immensity of it. It just always blew me away. Like, oh my God! So that's a special part of it. Is just the size. So there, that largest mountain valley, same size as Lake Tahoe. Very interestingly, Sierra Valley was a lake also, like Lake Tahoe, kind of a sister lake to Lake Tahoe, up until about 10,000 years ago. And of a similar depth as well, about 1,600 or more feet. Some of the wells they've drilled out in the middle of Sierra Valley have gone down 1,600 feet to bedrock till you finally hit the granite bedrock. And there's lots of layers of clay and stuff that also you hit as you're drilling down. But so it was a really deep lake, and then partly because it had volcanic rock and soils at the outlet, it eroded over time. Unlike Tahoe, it has like a less stable outlet in it. And it drained over several, hundreds of years, maybe even a few thousand years. And but it still has a lot of that wetness in the middle, there's influence of the lake still. It's still really wet. The wetlands have kind of taken a lot of the place of the old lake. But you can actually see there's places around Sierra Valley where you can see the contouring of where the shorelines used to be. There's a place right across from Genassi Ranch called Merry-Go-Round Hill that has terracing across it that used to be the shoreline of, you can see like different years, the shoreline of Sierra Valley. There's a book called, couple books. One's called Geology of the Feather River Country by Cordell Durrell, and it has some pictures of Merry-Go-Round Hill, shows that terracing. It's kind of on the west side of Merry-Go-Round Hill, like if you pass your place and kind of turn the corner past your barn, look back on that side of Merry-Go-Round Hill, you can kind of see these, there's a lot of gravel, and you can kind of see the terraces. It's kind of amazing where the shoreline used to be. And let's see, so some of those things that you were asking about again, this ties of Tahoe, 4 times, the city of San Francisco is just about exactly 30,000 acres in size, so 4 times the city of San Francisco. And then a lot of people are, so much emphasis, deservedly so, on the management of the Lake Tahoe Basin for the beautiful water quality of Lake Tahoe. And there's so many agencies and so much funding. And but the Sierra Valley Basin is, more than 50,000 acres larger than the Lake Tahoe Basin, which is pretty cool. Oh, and maybe I should, let's see, I want to hit on what do I want to? This map, well, yeah, I'll hit on that later. Never mind, talking to myself. So in Sierra Valley, you could see on that aerial image, it has the largest wetland complex in the Sierra Nevada. And this map shows the wetlands pretty well. This map maps the wetlands. A lot, here's the nature center. We're right here by the railroad track. And a lot of there's sort of more wetlands as you go further north, but there's wetlands the Church Ranch down here by Satley has really nice wet meadows and wetlands, and like Jameson Ranch, and all through the middle of the valley, the Sierra Valley Ranch, Roan Ranch and stuff. So it has both the largest wetland complex and about 30,000 acres of montane meadow. A lot of the montane meadow is more in the south part of the valley. And then up here around the old Judici Ranch, between Vinton and Frenchman Lake, as you drive up that way, there's a lot of really nice wet meadow too. And that's, probably the biggest montane meadow in the Sierra Nevada too. So that is partly why there's so many water birds, waterfowl, shorebirds, so many breeding species are those wetlands. I just wanted to show that again. This is kind of an aerial depiction of the wetlands. It shows that same wetlands that were on that map we just looked at. A lot of the, this map is interesting in that, the Sierra Valley, man, if you're down in Calpine, Satley area, down in the southwest corner of the valley, if you're down over here, the average annual rainfall can be 35 or 40 inches in those areas. Whereas if you're, over there, Chilkoot, it's 12 inches, so the valley's so big, it has this huge rain shadow effect, and partly because there's no uplift through the middle of the valley. But you can see all this snow on the southern, this is you're looking at a lot of the Sierra Crest to the south there and to the southwest. And that's where a lot of, water's coming from all around the valley, but the snowpack is especially robust. The peaks are higher. There's more precipitation in the south and southwest part of the valley. And then a lot of that water, you can kind of see here, it flows from south to north. And then it takes a big turn at the corral. It takes a big turn. It's kind of flowing north, and then it starts really heading west at the corral. And then finally takes a big southwest turn right at the railroad trestle here. By the way, the boundary of the preserve goes to the tracks. It's kind of an interesting aspect of this preserve in that the berm of the tracks is high enough where when you're down walking in the preserve here, you can't really see Beckworth and stuff often, you know. So it provides a certain, what do we say, like screening or something. And you can't see quite as much development and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool. But yeah, most of the northern boundary of the preserve is the tracks, the Union Pacific Railroad line. And so that's a good kind of a marker. Another superlative, well, switching from sort of size to water, as I mentioned earlier, the Sierra Valleys, the headwaters of the Middle Fork of the Feather River, and the California State Water Project. Kind of repeating some of this stuff, but yeah, it is like 27. It's amazing that the State Water Project provides a source of water to 27 million Californians, and that's actually been a big driver of some of the interest from funders, you know, from like agencies that fund the work of the land trust and foundations, is the water angle, that it's a really, really important source of water. And not just surface water, you know, that like flowing under the trestle there at the railroad tracks in the Middle Fork, but also this this point of, it's a huge groundwater basin too. You know, Lake Oroville stores around 3 million acre feet. And it's estimated that the groundwater in Sierra Valley is like more than twice that, you know, more like 2.5 times that. It's like a really, really important. So it's, you know, so it's incumbent upon people who care about the future of, you know, water supply in California and beyond, to protect places like this where it's storing a lot of groundwater and not. There's a Sierra Valley groundwater district that there's quite a few center pivot operations that grow alfalfa and pump groundwater, but thankfully there's a groundwater conservation district that limits the amount and seeks not to overdraw the groundwater. So it's really important both for surface water and groundwater, the totality. And then a really interesting thing about, I don't have a good picture of it. There's a good picture of it, just looking out the window. See that trestle on the railroad line? Keep pointing with my reed here. That trestle on there. There's a certain power to it. I don't know what it is. I'll just hold it like a baby. But that's where the Middle Fork leaves the preserve, is that metal railroad trestle. And interestingly, at that very same point, literally right when you go under that trestle, you're within the wild and scenic designated Middle Fork Feather River. And 80 miles from that very point right there is designated as wild and scenic all the way down to Lake Oroville. No dams, no diversions from that point on. So in some ways, this preserve is like a de facto extension of the wild and scenic river. And yeah, there's Forest Service land, right? And if you cross under that trestle and then go left bank left, to your west, that's Forest Service land. To the right is actually other private land, like who owns land right there? I can't think who it is. Langford owns some of that land. But I think that's really cool that the preserve goes right to the Wild and Scenic River. And the Middle Fork was one of 8. When the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act passed in 1968, the Middle Fork was one of only 8 rivers that were originally designated as wild and scenic by the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. So it was
the first one on the list.
It was the first one on the list. Wow. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. So it's what's that?
15, but if you need a little longer.
I only have 15 minutes left?
Yeah.
No, man, see, I told you. I could go for 3 hours here. I don't think I'm going to get to the human history part. So that's really significant too. And a lot of people dig that they could just like, be canoeing here and go right through and then around Wild and Scenic. What do we got? That's more, that shows that trestle. You can see the preserve here where the greenish preserve ends, then it's the Wild and Scenic starting right on the north edge of the preserve. Talked about the convergence of the landscapes. Part of that leads to, it's kind of like here on some of the north part of the valley, you have black oaks. And then, east part of the valley with the 12 inches of rain, it looks like the Great Basin. You got sage scrub and junipers, and you look like it could be out in the middle of the Great Basin. That's out on the Roan Ranch. Barwon Ranch, sorry. And then you have wetlands, like in the middle of the valley. This is taken from Marble Hot Springs Road. Really cool montane riparian habitat. A lot of this is volcanic cliffs, like sometimes called Vestes Buttes or Beckworth Buttes, towards Beckworth Peak. Where is it? There, you can see it in that direction. But those volcanic cliffs and stuff are unique in themselves, like for like eyrie nesting peregrine falcons, prairie falcons, canyon wrens, things like that. So the volcanic component adds its own habitat. This is a big fen, which is kind of, I don't know if you've been out on fens, but they're like water beds. This is on this is out off of West Willow Street. You know that fen. And these are sage, cotton sedge that are out on this fen. Beautiful, beautiful part of Sierra Valley. And then the big wetland, the permanent wetlands with tules like shown here. A lot of that in the middle of the preserve. In terms of plants, I started with a presentation of this length, I couldn't go into like showing a bunch of plants, so I resisted. Especially now that I know I only have 15 minutes, it was a good idea. But one thing about Sierra Valley is amazing, again, this convergence of these soils and these three ecoregions. There are plants from those three ecoregions that converge. And Bill Harnack, a good friend of mine who passed away, unfortunately, a couple years ago, he wrote a flora for Sierra Valley and documented nearly 1,200 different plant species and varieties in and around Sierra Valley, which is amazingly about 18% of California's known plant species and varieties, even though the area of Sierra Valley is only about 1/3 of 1% of the surface area of California. So it's sort of wildly biodiverse from a floral perspective. And the trail, the Rebecca Wank Botanical Trail that you can tie in from the west entrance off of A23 does I think there'll be plant labeling around here, around the Nature Center too. But right now it has some really cool, like a loop botanical trail that labels plants. And you can get a really good feel for that a diversity of flora. So it's kind of one of the, Sierra Valley is a famous birding destination. It has more than 280 bird species have been observed in Sierra Valley. About half of those breed in and around the valley. And this 280 is the whole Sierra Valley basin, so it's not just the valley floor and the wetlands, but it's up in the, the trees, like the whole basin that drains into Sierra Valley. And these are just a smattering of some of those species. White-faced ibis, you got some green-winged teal here and cinnamon teal in all their glory, and a marsh wren singing. I wanted to pay a quick homage. There's one group of species I wanted to pay a quick homage to, and they are the long-distance migrants. This is a Swainson's hawk, which spends its winter, it's probably there now, they have kind of a long migration, but they winter in the pampas of Argentina. And then they migrate to breed in Sierra Valley and other places in North America. This is one of their southernmost breeding valleys, but they make a really long migration, like thousands and thousands of miles down to central and southern Argentina where they spend the winter. And they breed right here in Sierra Valley. There's probably about a dozen pairs that breed in Sierra Valley.
Say the name again.
Swainson's hawk. Yeah. Buteo swainsonii. And here's another one. This is a shorebird called a Wilson's phalarope. And similarly, they are a really long distance migrant. They winter in saline lakes in Patagonia. And they migrate all the way up here to breed in Sierra Valley. And one thing that's interesting about them is the female is the colorful one. They have reverse reverse sexual dimorphism, and the male's more drab. And then the female gets multiple males, so they have kind of a uncommon pattern there. But they're really cool species. They kind of turn around like tops. They're only about this big, actually. And they feed by turning in circles in water, creating their own eddies, and then slurping up all the aquatic invertebrates in the eddy. There's what they look. There's the female in front and a male in the back, in the middle. The other longest distance migrant are cliff swallows, which migrate. They have a broad winter range in South America. They like southern Brazil, northern Argentina, Peru, parts of like southern Peru. But they have a really long migration, and they're the species you see at the steel bridge with their mud nests that they've adapted well to humans. They often build their nests on structures, including bridges, like at the steel bridge on Marble Hot Springs Road. And they're real beautiful species too. I sometimes like to call them brown rump swallows, like the yellow-rumped warbler. You can see its yellow rump. They have a real notable brown rump when they're in flight. Pretty much all other swallows have a solid dark back and rump. So, and this is where they nest on the steel bridge here. So I think this is, one thing about the preserve that's so cool. Sierra Valley is already a really well-known birding spot, especially Marble Hot Springs Road, but this creates another birding spot where the already robust birding community has another place to come to bird watch and hike on trails and learn about the species of Sierra Valley. Another, just hitting on these migrants because I think they're so interesting. Right around now, this species starts to arrive in Sierra Valley, but from a different place. It's a species that breeds up in the tundra of the Arctic and winters in Sierra Valley, and it's the rough-legged hawk, which is a real beautiful species. In Sierra Valley, they're used to tundra, so they're often like perched on a cow pie, or they're like maybe a fence post, but they're on the ground a lot. They're on cow pies a lot. They don't need a lot of height. Eat a lot of voles. I don't know if those of you who've been around Sierra Valley right now, like the vole populations, a little meadow mouse or vole, they're cyclical, and right now the population's really high. These guys come into Sierra Valley when the voles, there's different cyclical prey-predator population dynamics, like with lemmings and wolves and things. Here, man, the rough-legged hawk and the voles, like right now voles are peaking, so there's going to be like hundreds of rough-legged hawks and ferruginous hawks and red-tailed hawks in Sierra Valley this winter. They're already arriving. The red-tailed hawks are already like going to town, but it's going to be a really cool, Sierra Valley raptor watching in the winter is like really primo. A lot of times people are used to coming here in the spring and summer, looking at all the breeding birds in the wetlands. But this is a really good place. Like a lot of people are going to come here to the Nature Center, and just right out here in these floodplains and grasslands, you're going to see like a lot of raptors. So I would encourage you to like bone up on your raptors, because these windows and stuff, people are always going to be like, what's that? What's that? I've already had 3 or 4 conversations today where people were like, what's that? And there were red-tailed hawks and ravens. And here's the other main wintering hawk. Neither the rough-legged hawk nor this species are in Sierra Valley except for in the winter, interestingly. And this is the ferruginous hawk. Gorgeous hawk. It's the biggest of all the buteo hawks, same genus as like red-tailed hawk, Swainson's hawk, red-shouldered hawk. But this one's big. It's like called Buteo regalis. It's almost like eagle-sized. Kind of feeds like an eagle, eats a lot of big things like jackrabbits, and will actually eat sometimes we'll eat like baby bobcats and coyotes and things like that. So it's like a really big hawk. And you look at those talons on the base there too. But really beautiful with these rufous colors and feathering that goes all the way down the legs to the yellow talons and tarsi. Really amazing species. So look for these. These ones are notable. Like pretty much all hawks like this. See this rough-legged hawk? It's kind of like, you can often identify hawks by zonation of patterns on their head, chest, and belly. So rough-legged hawk, light head, light chest, really dark belly. See that dark belly? Ferruginous hawk, light head, light chest, light belly. It's the only one that's like light. So that can be and then red-tailed hawks are dark head, light chest, dark belly. So it's kind of that's one nifty way to. And of course, sandhill cranes. You know, Sierra Valley, like I say, it's the southernmost breeding area for greater sandhill cranes in California. And there's estimated to be about 500 pairs of greater sandhill cranes in the state of California. About 50 of them breed in Sierra Valley, so about a tenth of the state's population of breeding greater sandhill cranes breed in Sierra Valley. And this is a cool picture. They have really neat mating rituals, jumping up and down, flapping their wings. A really cool thing too, they pick up sticks and toss them. This is a picture. This is probably the male tossing a stick, you know, trying to impress the female. So they do a lot of funny things. They grab cow pies and sticks and throw them, and they jump up and down. Here's a couple colts. You know, baby sandhill cranes are. It's funny how birds, they got to come up with a name for every kind of baby, you know, rather than just calling them sandhill crane chicks. They're colts. But these ones are probably about like 2 or 3 weeks old. They're already getting kind of big, but they obviously can't fly yet. In the snow off of Marble Hot Springs Road. I'm going to kind of, I know I'm already out of time, huh?
I mean, as long as everyone else is okay. A little bit less for questions and answers.
If I keep going at the pace I'm going, I probably need like 15 more minutes or something. Okay. Okay. So one interesting thing, this bird, this is probably the bird that's been on the tours I've led and stuff, most often the two most accidentally identified bird species. Because people will be like, what is that yellow-headed black bird? Like, yes, you are correct. Or what is that black bird with the red wing? You know, it's the red-winged blackbird. So these are like amazing denizens of the Sierra Valley wetlands, you know, and the beautiful song, well, the red wing has a beautiful song, conkery, you know, and the yellow-headed is debatable more, sounds more like electricity or something like, you know, kind of like a weird electric siren or something. Unmistakable. You can, if they were here right now and we walked outside, you could hear them, you know, a quarter mile away or more, half a mile away, really loud. Another really cool species of the wetlands of Sierra Valley, the maybe misnamed, this one you can see it better, the white-faced ibis. You know, they could have maybe called it like, the only thing is they're glossy colored, they have this iridescence. There is a glossy ibis in the eastern US and Gulf Coast and Florida. It's called the glossy ibis. Looks pretty much identical to a white-faced ibis. But this is our white-faced ibis. You can see it has this, during the breeding season, has this really handsome white forehead and chin that goes around a red eye, and really beautiful tones. That's one that, depending on how the light hits them, they can look like peacock herl or they can look black. They have amazing sort of cinnamon to ruby tones on their neck and head and stuff. So great bird, and they're pretty big. They're a shorebird that's probably, they stand about like this tall, and they have that really long decurved bill, look like they're from Egypt or something. And one thing about Sierra Valley, it has one of the biggest it used to be believed to be the biggest breeding colony. They're colonial. They breed in colonies. There's, like Sierra Valley probably has like 5 spots where there's like 400 or more pairs of white-faced ibis. So they breed in colonies. They lash their nest to tules. But it used to be believed that the biggest breeding colony in California was here in Sierra Valley. They're actually a species that's doing pretty well, like with the flooding of the population down there. So it may not be the biggest breeding colony anymore, but nonetheless, there's probably about 2,500 breeding pairs of white-faced ibis in Sierra Valley. So it's a very significant breeding area for white-faced ibis. Here's a little marsh wren. This kind of sounds like this one kind of sounds like a sprinkler. I didn't have time to put. One cool thing about the Nature Center, there are vocalizations in there. I don't know if you've seen it where you can like, oh, Jenna left. How is it that you trigger hey Kevin, how is it, do you point a pointer at the things to make them vocalize, or do you hit a button? Or?
I don't know, I think it's going to be touchscreen.
Touchscreen, okay. But it's really cool. One cool thing about the exhibits here is that they're going to be very interactive in the sense that they will be an auditory component of touchscreen. Like you'll be able to look at a species and touch a screen or point something, and you'll be able to hear its song. But anyway, so if you hear the Martian, it sounds kind of like a sprinkler, like yeah, it's still like a sprinkler that's like stuck or something, going over and over. And then I was talking about the flyway, Pacific Flyway, how Pyramid Lake is part of this Eastern Sierra Pacific Flyway. A species that's here a lot in Sierra Valley in the summer, but doesn't breed here, are American white pelicans, and they're probably our heaviest bird. They're not as tall as the sandhill cranes, but really heavy, and they got that beak can hold more than its belly can, that huge beak. But they come over from Pyramid. The biggest breeding colony in North America of American white pelicans is at Pyramid Lake. On some of the islands of Pyramid Lake, there's like, I can't remember, I think it's like 2,200 pairs or something. So they come over, as the pelican flies, it's something like 70 miles direct from Pyramid Lake or something, and they can just catch a thermal and then cruise over here. And they feed on both the fishes, Sierra Valley is kind of warmer water fishery for the most part, until the trestle or so, and then you start picking up trout again. But out in the middle of the valley, it's dominated by like catfish, bass, carp. They especially love the carp and the catfish. They come over here, fish for the day, and then go back to Pyramid Lake. And a lot of the pelicans that are here aren't breeding. Interestingly, you can tell if a pelican is a breeding pelican or not by whether it has a horn on its beak. So this one on the left is a breeding adult American white pelican. The one on the right isn't. Almost all the ones you see in Sierra Valley in the summer are non-breeding. They kind of have to wait their turn at Pyramid Lake while the adults, because they have all the good nesting spots and stuff. So a lot of the ones that are over here are sub-adults that are they usually take like 2 or 3 years to get to breeding age. But anyway, they're a real spectacular part. You'll see them flying around in formations, looking like little aircraft, they're so big. So waterfowl is a big part of the avifauna of, I mentioned how 280 bird species, about half of those breed in Sierra Valley. Of the 280, around 110 are associated with the wetlands, either in migration or breeding. And a lot of those are waterfowl species, like ducks. And about 13 species of ducks breed in Sierra Valley. You could just say a dozen species of breeding ducks. And then there's about another 8 species that migrate through, or either winter or migrate through, but don't breed. This curiously blue bill, it looks like you hit it with a highlighter or something. It's really hard to believe it's a natural color, but it's a male ruddy duck. Their bill isn't that color in the non-breeding season, but amazingly it turns that really kind of turquoise blue during the breeding season. And they have a crazy breeding display. The ruddy ducks, they kind of click their wings and flick their tail, and they make this clacking noise with their bill. It's really interesting. And I think one of the most beautiful ducks, this is actually 2 different species. This is a male northern pintail on the right and a female mallard on the left hanging out together. But I always think the male northern pintail is just so beautiful. This is one we already saw, the green-winged teal on the left and the cinnamon teal pair on the right. Cinnamon teal are, along with gadwalls, probably the most common breeding duck in Sierra Valley. There's, I would estimate there to be, during the breeding season, probably 2,000 or more pairs of cinnamon teal in the Sierra Valley wetlands. Here's probably these are the top 3 most common breeding ducks are mallard, cinnamon teal we just saw, and this is the gadwall. Kind of, you could call it the black butt duck. Really beautiful. This is a male gadwall. They're really common. I've done waterfowl surveys along the Sierra Valley wetlands before, and they really hold tight when they're on nests, but if you kind of walk along, when I was doing the surveys, I was trying to flush them without stepping on nests, but surprising number of breeding gadwalls too, easily more than 1,500 or pairs in a wet year in Sierra Valley. This is a species that is fairly uncommon in Sierra Valley, but is common on the preserve. It's actually the only it's the only waterfowl species that is a species of special concern in Sierra Valley. The only duck species that is a species of special concern, and it's partly because they need deep water. This is a diving duck. Those other ducks, the mallard, the gadwall, the teal, these are all what are called dabbling ducks, where you see them, they swim along and they just they put their head down, but their butt dip. They hardly ever go underwater when they're feeding. They're called dabbling ducks. You could call them floating ducks. But this is a diving duck that dives underwater, and it needs deep water, this species. It needs water generally at least 8 feet deep, and they only breed in such areas where the water's deep. And behind the Decker Dam by Gary Romano's place, and then in general there's just deep, because a lot of the channels of Sierra Valley come together on the preserve, they're condensing into fewer and fewer channels. So they're getting deeper and deeper relative to places further south in Sierra Valley. So the water, there's a lot of deep water on the preserve. And this species, the redhead, is a common breeder on the preserve, but not really elsewhere in Sierra Valley, along Marble Hot Springs Road, but not really elsewhere. A couple falcons that we have in, there's actually three breeding falcon species and a 4th wintering falcon species, including on those cliffs I pointed out that there's not a window here, but these cliffs that are away from Beckworth Peak called Vestes Butte or Beckworth Peak, there's a falcon eyrie there, and it's a peregrine falcon. This is a peregrine falcon, prairie falcon. Generally, if you see a big dark falcon, it's a peregrine falcon. Big light colored falcon with these kind of dark wing pits, like a T in their wing pit, is a prairie falcon. This is a species that says its own name. This is one of the most common wetland species you'll encounter, and you'll even hear them from here at the Nature Center. This is a really good one to know because it's a big shorebird. And it says its name, it goes, wee, wee, lit, wee, 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 lit, wee, 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 lit. When they're doing this, they have this sort of Zorro-looking black and white underwing. And when they're startled off a nest or when they're agitated, they fly and flash their wings and do that vocalization. And it's a willet. They do, wee, wee, willet, wee, wee, willet. It's named after its vocalization. There's another willet on a fence post. Here's another bird that you more often in the wetlands again hear than see, partly because they do this crazy pose. They do a freeze pose where they hold their beak straight up in the air, making like a reed, and they don't move at all. And this is the American bittern. But you'll hear their bitterns are common along the river channels right from the Nature Center here during the breeding season. They're even here in the non-breeding season if it doesn't snow too much or get too cold. But they have a really deep call that sounds kind of like a bullfrog. They go, and you'll hear that. It's like a bullfrog. You'll hear bullfrogs too going. Bullfrogs are more like, I'm possessed by a bullfrog. I don't know what overcame me. No. Kevin was mentioning, this is an amazing species to see, and when the voles are in, this is a species that's been few and far between in Sierra Valley the last couple of years because the vole populations have been low. But along with the rough-legged hawk, this species really keys into voles, and it's a short-eared owl, one of, you might say California's most sought-after owl species to find. And one really cool thing about short-eared owls, they're a wetland nesting owl. They nest in and on the edges of wetlands. If they're on the edge of wetlands, really tall grass, and their nests are almost impossible to find. But they love the preserve. They're like, it's one of the best areas in California when the vole populations are high to find short-eared owls. And they're just a gorgeous species. They're a fairly large, they're a medium-sized owl. They're probably about this tall. I've been seeing them on the north edge of your ranch, right at the county line. There was a pair like nesting right around there this year, and they fly like moths. They look like their wings are dislocated when they're flying, and they fly really low to the ground, and they're crepuscular. They pretty much, if you want to find a short-eared owl, the best time is dawn and dusk. You can see them in the day, but real dawn and dusk is the prime time. Another wetland nesting raptor. This is a harrier, northern harrier. And they also a raptor that nests in wetlands, including tules. They'll actually often build their nest, they'll lash their nest right to tules. And so these guys often hang out with the short-eared owls, one being a diurnal species, the other more of a nocturnal crepuscular. And man, we haven't seen, this is a species I'm kind of worried about in Sierra Valley. They used to be quite common. where there'd be like 5 or 6 colonies around the valley, and you could, there might be, you could regularly find them at certain spots. But in the last, 5 or 10, I don't know what, Jill, last 5 or 10 years, they've been hard to come by, huh? Okay, yeah. But it's the burrowing owl, the only subterranean fossorial owl in North America that actually nests underground. They usually use ground squirrel or badger diggings and dens to. They don't generally dig their own. They'll sort of clear out the diggings of badgers and ground squirrels. But yeah, burrowing owls. So this is a species we've done some work, like on the Madalena part of the preserve, you can install artificial nesting structures. And there have been burrowing owls on the preserve fairly recently, like south of the Bolson House, kind of out near where the Jenner Memorial Outlook, the mountains overlook. There's that old dam. I'm kind of talking to the FRLT staff here, but there's an old dam, an earthen dam there. That's the most recent place they've been on the preserve. But this is a species I think the Land Trust can manage towards trying to restore in Sierra Valley. There's a couple shots of them. Amazing owl species. They kind of, and the burrowing owls usually in kind of sagebrush, bitterbrush scrub is where they sometimes they're out in like pastures. This is a sage species that really common around the west entrance of the preserve, and has one of the most complex songs of any bird in North America. It's the sage thrasher. Oh, this one's really, it's really, they have an interesting like double voice box, double larynx. Yeah, so they kind of can make 2 songs at the same time. So it's sort of disorienting to listen to. They're kind of like, but they're like 2 of those things happening at the same time on different pitches. And it's just like, whoa, they're like, but they've been documented as being one of the most complex, along with they're in the same bird. This is a sage thrasher. Same family as mockingbirds. So they have and they can do mimicry too. Sort of an endless vocal repertoire. What's that? Sage thrasher. Yeah, sage thrasher. In the same family as mockingbird. There's a lot of thrashers in the southwest deserts like Mojave and Sonoran, like a crystal thrasher and a curve-billed thrasher and a LeConte's thrasher. We don't have really, well, there's one in the Sierra foothills, the crystal thrasher, but we don't have many thrashers up this way. But they're all like crazy vocalists. A couple sparrows are common on the preserve. Brewer's sparrow on the left and Vesper sparrow on the right. These are tricky, but amazing singers, and they're only here seasonally. The riparian area, yellow warblers are common. Interestingly, if you just get just off the preserve and go downstream, you start getting willows. You'll start finding these yellow warblers just close to the preserve. And then more of the raptors, ospreys nest on and around the preserve or around. Yeah, okay, I'm going to finish up here. Bald eagles. Bald eagles are really common on the preserve. Interestingly, the eagles don't seem to nest immediately on the preserve, but there's 3 pairs up at Lake Davis and a couple pairs at Frenchman Lake, and they seem to come down and kind of like the pelicans, they feed on the preserve. And then some of the old barns, around Sierra Valley have wonderful barn owls. And I don't know, that's one thing I think the Land Trust can do, put up a couple barn owl boxes, hopefully on some of these old structures. There used to be a barn here that they had to remove and had a couple barn owls in it. So they do pretty well with barn owl boxes. So just quickly hitting on, we're talking about all these birds. The mammals are just as exciting to a lot of the agency biologists, especially now. Sierra Valley has become one of the hubs of rewilding for a lot of species in the whole state of California, including some species that are controversial, like the wolf, because it has impacts on cattle and agricultural industry. And then elk are coming back. Both the wolves and the elk are coming back into the region. Something you hardly ever see these days in North America is kind of the rewilding or the re-establishment of species. It was believed for a long time that elk never occurred here, but there's been a couple papers recently where they historically, about 100 years ago, until 100 years ago, they were in Sierra Valley but super rare. But now they're coming in. There's like quite a few elk breeding in Red Clover Valley and Bayam Sayo, which they changed the name of Squaw Queen Valley to Bayam Sayo. The official name now is Bayam Sayo, the Maidu name. But yeah, there's like nowhere else in the state you could have an outing around here, have a really good chance of seeing gray wolves, Rocky Mountain elk, probably with a little Roosevelt elk genetics in them, river otters, bear, pronghorn, badger. You know, it's really an amazing short-tailed weasel, like Nils was talking about. And really quite a count of mammals totally, too, the 50 mammal species. And again, it's partly these three ecoregions coming together. There's species like the pronghorn from the Great Basin, you know, more of a Great Basin species that comes into Sierra Valley. And then there's, you know, the wolf and the elk. I think the wolves are kind of following the elk. And unfortunately, they're, you know, getting the taste for cattle in some cases, too. But yeah, they kind of coming down together more from the Cascades. And then there's other species like the black bears, and there's a Sierra Mountain beaver too, which I didn't find a slide of, but it's actually not a beaver. It's called Aplodontia rufa. It's a little rodent that is a Sierra species that occurs in Sierra Valley. Yeah, I'll try. What I'm going to do, I kind of ran out of time on this presentation. Luckily for you, I'd have got another hour. But I'm going to like add a few of the things, including the cultural component. One thing I did want to show you real quick here is this is a map of all the wolf packs in California. No, there's 9. They updated the map just like a week ago, or a couple weeks ago. Anyway, there's 9 known wolf packs in California, and 6 of them are in the Feather River watershed. So Feather River watershed's like Wolf Central right now. And here we are in Sierra Valley. Well, interestingly, Sierra Valley is covered by wolf pack territories. Like you can't actually see Sierra Valley because all these wolf pack territories mapped like cover it up. But anyway, the preserve. Let's see. We got the Sierra County line is right on the south edge of Beckworth. So we're kind of like we're sort of like at the bottom of that D in Diamond. So the Bayam Sayo is the, you know, Clover Valley, Squaw Valley pack. Diamond pack is more over like north of Chilkoot, going up the Diamond Mountains towards Frenchman Lake. It's been actually over on the 395 side quite a bit too, like on the Puma Robles Ranch that Feather River Land Trust has an easement on. And then there's been a Beckworth pack. It's right near us, the south side of Beckworth Peak. About the wolf issue. You know, I've been in a couple pretty hairy public meetings recently where it's real. You know, people are getting their livestock killed and have a lot of concerns and trying to work with the state on the management of the wolves. But it is amazing that they're coming in and they're producing all these packs. You know, so and then that's all I had. I was going to go into some cultural stuff, but I am out of time. So I'm going to save.
Q&A.
Oh yeah, Q&A. Yeah, let me. I actually have a slide. This is a slide, couple like closing slides here. This is on the